Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome to a morning after reaction podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me to break down everything that happened last night in round 18 versus the Rabbitohs is my good mate, Sixties and big fella. Last week I popped off about officials and gave the boys a pat in the back for a great team effort, but there is no hiding from it. Last night was an error-riddled and frankly stupid example of football from our boys. They did not play very smart against the Rabbitohs.
Yeah, it was a question of some of the absolute fundamentals of the game that just went missing completely. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in this. It's really, first of all, to our listeners, thank you for tuning into this now. It was just a bit too late last night to record an instant reaction podcast, and we had been on duty since early in the afternoon with our appearance in Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, and we hope you stay listening at the end of this podcast for our chat with David Liddiard, because it was, again, just an absolute honour to be talking to one of our great Eels ambassadors in David Liddiard. With NAIDOC week coming next week, well, starting on Sunday, part of our chat was about the great community work that David does. And it was, he's such a humble man, and we had to get someone else really to speak about him, because it's, it sometimes gets a little bit, someone is talking about themselves and what they do, it puts them on the spot a little bit. So that was a feature of the podcast, as was the great roll-up in the bistro at Para League. So thank you to all of the listeners that came to watch the podcast, that came and chatted with us after the podcast. We ended up being in the club for quite some time after we finished, and we were really, really grateful about that, just being able to chat to other Eels supporters about what's happening, and also just to say g'day and all the kind words that were said. So, please have a listen to that, because it's and David's quite entertaining. What he says with regard to his phone call with Mick Cronin recently, that was a classic. So, just a great human, and quite enjoyable to speak with him in that pre-game. And I guess that's what makes it really hard, doesn't it, John, that with a match like last night, we were, quite frankly, had gone into the stadium. We caught the end of the reserve grade game, but we were on a bit of a high from after that podcast, and just getting to spend time with David, and also Steve Ella came up to say hello as well. And to sit through what we ended up sitting through in that match, it left, unfortunately, a sour taste in the mouth, didn't it? About, you can be on such a, be buzzing about something and then feel so down. And of course, we were buzzing because on top of the appearance in the Leagues Club, the New South Wales Cup team continues to win and are actually really in a charge towards finals football, despite players being elevated out of the grade, and some key players, but they still are finding a way to win. And unfortunately then, we've watched a game of football where just the basics, the fundamentals were foreign to our Eels.
Before I respond, we probably should give a quick shout out to our sponsor as well, In Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan and Parramatta. I know Greg and the crew won't mind us being a little bit deep into the podcast before I give them the shout out, but thank you, Star Partners. But to respond to you there, 60s, the contrast between the Cup and the NRL team is so fascinating because the Cup didn't play great football last night. And to be fair, it was similar conditions to what we saw in NRL with intermittent, not heavy rain, but heavy drizzle that obviously made conditions difficult. But as opposed to their first grade counterparts, the Cup find a way to win, even down on resources, much like the NRL team. And opposed to that is the NRL team who are just finding ways to lose. And again, it probably just comes back to that concept that winning, just like losing, becomes a habit. One team started the season that way in the New South Wales Cup. They went 0-5, I believe.
Yes.
And then the NRL were the opposite. They had a good start to the season. They were 2-1, and the one loss was against the Panthers where Bowie Simonson got knocked out of the game in the first couple of minutes. And they still put up a stoic effort against the back-to-back premiers in the Panthers. Then they lose Mitchell Moses, and then everything just derails from there. Last night, really, it was two ugly games, but it completely epitomised how the two seasons have gone. One team dug in deep, found a way to squeeze out an ugly win, put themselves into provisionally, I believe, the top 6. If I just quickly look at that New South Wales Cup ladder.
No, I think they're coming about 8th now.
But on wins, they are... they're... because the extra bye for the Panthers, that's why. Panthers 8 wins, 1 draw. Parramatta Eels 9 wins, 0 draws. So the Panthers benefiting from an extra game in hand from the bye there, the 2 points. But the Eels now provisionally right in that hunt for the finals in the New South Wales Cup. Contrast that against the NRL. And, mate, last night they just stumbled and bumbled and did... when I said they played some really stupid football, I mean that. They played some of the dumbest football I've seen. Conditions or no conditions. There wasn't just pushing silly passes and dropping balls. It was being a metre inside the 10-metre zone from a short dropout. Like stuff that you shouldn't... That is schoolboy stuff. Or not even schoolboy stuff.
Yeah. We were moaning about it during the game. Just the most basic of errors and, like last tackle options, sometimes almost appearing non-existent or like they didn't know what they were going to do. We had drop ball, just error after error, handing the ball to the Rabbitohs. We had, as you mentioned, they're touching the ball inside the 10 metres, and instead of the Eels having possession or maybe a penalty in the at South Sydney's end of the field, we had them with a penalty and going straight on the attack. We had moments where the ball was going down and the Rabbitohs were picking up, and we thought there was going to be long distance tries. It was, but defensively, there seemed to be times where players just clocked off, just didn't do their job. And
big time.
And it was just the contrast between that and South. They had some moments where their defence really rose to the occasion, like right on the try line, or even there was
Will Penasini got dragged down by millimetres in a huge try-saving effort at one point.
Yeah, and those sorts of efforts, those effort-on-effort plays, the not giving up. I mean, we saw a couple of those from the Eels. Reg saved a try with desperation on the line. Mm-hmm. We saw Charlie Guymer chasing what threatened to be a breakaway
another try against a runner play after what happened last week against Newcastle. It was a carbon copy of what we saw against Newcastle. But then Charlie made the big cover tackle, and I think the Eels recovered the loose ball after that. So we'll talk about Charlie.
One of the most frustrating things, John, was when those try moments came, it was preceded by, like, you could actually see it happen. Yeah. I turned to Clint and I just went, we're in trouble here. And it was
our left edge pretty much. Yeah.
It was some of the longer distance ones. It was like you could tell where we'd maybe had an ordinary set in possession and it was immediately followed up by a very ordinary set in defence early in the set. You can just see, this is not going to end well. And like even with that first try where we just kept inviting them down to the try line with errors, it was so frustrating just to see it, especially in those conditions. It was just football that made no sense. And unfortunately, what you end up coming away from with something like that is, and again, for a number of players, I thought there were high effort areas. I mean, our debutants can't, can hold their heads high. Both Charlie Guymer and Jake Tungor, there's no finger pointing at them in terms of blame or anything like that. There's maybe some other players that need to take a long, hard look in the mirror about what they're producing. And as it turns out as well, it looks like the injury toll's going to grow with Junior Paulo.
Yeah, not looking good.
Not looking good. And, who knows, it may well be him for the season.
I would say
depending on what scans show.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a big old bag of ice on that foot, and I think there was some people caught up with him maybe post-game, and it didn't seem to be a particularly positive initial diagnosis. So have to wait and see for the official confirmation from the club, obviously pending scans. But the problem is when you're a big unit like Junior, even small injuries to the foot get magnified because of, how much weight you have to carry through contact. So going to be, I know people are down on Junior, but that's still a big loss to the forward pack.
Well, again, what it does, and this is my concern, John, some people might look at it and go, well, I wanted a change there and I wanted a young player brought up, etc. But, and that may well happen. But what it then also does is it insulates players that maybe should be dropped to New South Wales Cup.
Yeah.
Because, we're already losing Junior. We can't really afford to drop another experienced player in the team and run out there with a whole lot of inexperienced players. So, yeah, that was really the issue that we were talking about earlier in the year when people were calling for Sivo to be axed. Was, okay, well, if you drop Sivo, this is what could happen, with player X or player Y. Now, they've ended up giving the start to Jake Tungor, and he did quite well. So, they can feel happy about that. But we've gone through a number of iterations before we got to that point when we tried to cover for Sivo's absences this season, and it's been problematic. So Jake Tungor's probably cemented himself in that job now for whatever length of time Sivo might be out. Who knows? With the way Sivo's going with this hamstring, because it had him out beforehand, it's got him out now for an extended period. He might not play again this season. I'm not putting that outside the realms of possibility there, especially, given that we're in round 18 now.
Yeah.
And if Tungor was going okay, through this period of time where Sivo's out, why would they drop him? It's, especially with a team that's not performing well. So, it could well be that, Sivo might have played his last game for the Eels. We don't know. There's plenty of rumours about him being given permission to negotiate or them trying to find a new home for Sivo. So, it could be he's played his last game. Maybe Jake Tungor is playing his way into another contract for next year. He started, and this is the point that we have to make with someone like Jake Tungor. He started the season playing in the centres for Wenty in the Ron Massey Cup, and he's now made an NRL debut. So that's where things have gone in terms of the Eels depth chart this year. I mean, we've celebrated the achievements of Jake Tungor, but that's also the reality. The reality is they've been lucky to find someone in Ron Massey Cup who has had the capacity to be able to rise to NRL and perform his job out there on the wing, do well in his debut. But I mean, that's where we're at with the depth chart. That's also where we're at now in terms of injuries, because it is not a pretty sight right now, especially in a short roster. I mean, this is where it becomes, it's head scratching that we sit on such a short roster, and that's not going to change. We're in July now. So, we've talked about it. It'll probably be the Eels would have met the minimum requirements for the NRL, because at some stage this year they had 30 players on their books. It's just that 3 players were pretty much released by the start of the season. And we've been running around with 27. If they've had to elevate someone, that's just been an internal elevation. It hasn't been signing anyone. That doesn't change any depth charts in any way whatsoever. So credit to Jake, but we can't afford any more injuries in the team, let alone injuries to the back line, because we haven't even got the back line depth there now, even with pathways players, because we've got the likes of Ethan Martin, who's out with his hamstring injury, so he was part of that. We've had both Artie Miller-Stephen and Richie Penasini out for the year with their respective injuries. So when there just isn't the backline stocks, especially with the wing, that we maybe have in the forwards. So, yeah. Now let's flip to the positive, John. We've been talking about the rise of Jake Tungor from Ron Massey Cup to first grade. Let's start off this our in-depth discussion about the match with Charlie Guymer. Give me your takes, because I thought it was an outstanding debut.
Yeah, that Tamora honour roll had a great inclusion last night, didn't it? Little town providing some serious NRL talent, and Charlie went out there and look. I thought Trent Barrett probably mismanaged his bench a bit this week in terms of minutes for Sean Lane and how not minutes for Brendan Hands, but how he portioned those minutes. But like last week with Woods, what he got right absolutely was the rookie minutes off the interchange. Charlie came on, played 45 minutes across 2 stints, and came out there. Sometimes you see rookies try and overplay their hands because it's the adrenaline's pumping, blood is running through the head. They're making their debut. It's a huge moment. They want to make an impact, and Charlie went out there and made an impact by being aggressive without overplaying his hand. I know that the stats going to say he missed a few tackles, but and again, I haven't gone over the tape to confirm this, but if you go back and look, I think the vast majority of those missed tackles were him trying to make a big hit and actually making that initial contact and sending the runner sideways into other defenders, which, again, you love to see a guy trying to make an impact in that regard, but end up going into easily into triple digits on his runs. Good quality work through the middle. He was essentially playing, I know it's interchangeable, but he was essentially playing prop last night, and that is not a position that he usually plays. He has played lock forward, but he came out there and was thrown into the middle and handled it with aplomb. Some good tackles, some good ball running. Was effective in the red zone too. He didn't score a try, but he had a couple of good runs to set up. I think it was his run that actually set up the try for Reagan Campbell-Gillard. Allowed Brendan Hands to jump out of dummy half and create an opportunity. If I recall correctly there, I might be mistaken. But, yeah, He came out there, chip on his shoulder, looking to make a difference, and he did. And you love to see that from a young guy. Playing a bit of hair on fire in the wet. Team was struggling around him, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to try and turn the tide." And while it didn't, result in a win during his period of play he was on, it absolutely made a difference to how the game was being played.
Yeah, what you're really talking about a lot there is the energy that he brought to the team, and also what we saw was high effort areas as well. So you talked about making that difference in his defensive efforts, the power that he brought to each carry that he made, and it was, and I knew there'd be missed tackles that'd be credited because, like you, I haven't watched the tape, but my recollection is the same, where he was absolutely looking to make a mark on a South player, and he might have chopped the legs or knocked them off balance, or he was shooting out of the line to bring a bit of line speed. He's just we've lacked that sort of energy in the pack this year. That, I mean, to an extent as well, Luca Moretti brings that when he plays. So they're similar in that regard. Charlie is just tough. He is just really, really tough. I had the opportunity to speak to his family last night. They were up there in the bistro before the game in their T-shirts, and I spoke to his dad and uncle, and shout out to them. And I was reflecting on our first visions of Charlie playing in the centres, I believe, for Harold Matt's team, and just seeing that transition that he's made closer, to end up running around in the middle there. I think his dad mentioned even when he was younger, he was playing 5'8".
Yes,
as well, because he
correct.
was talking about his capacity to be a ball player. And I said to him, I thought his game the previous week in New South Wales Cup was arguably the best football that I'd seen him play. And he agreed and said there was he saw a lot more ball play from him than he'd seen in recent times. So and he spoke about his background going further back. So I was really, really buoyed and encouraged by what I saw from Charlie. And I think in my mind, he's cemented his place in the team for the rest of this season.
Yeah, I agree.
You cannot have him not being selected now, because, as I said, he brings something which has been missing in the team, and in that level of energy that he brings. And whilst we have at times looked so tired through the middle, even on the edges as well at times, he is the antithesis of that. He lifts it up a gear, and the way the game has evolved, we just don't see some of the bigger forwards having as much of a role as the more mobile, smaller forwards these days. So, the game goes through these different periods of its evolution about how it's played. We know that it's a lot of attack has been taking apart compressed defences these days, being able to get around them, and goodness knows we've been on the receiving end of the compressed defence being caught out this season. But the role of the smaller forwards has really seemed to come in vogue. It doesn't mean there isn't a place for the bigger forwards, but
balance.
You've got to have your share of those mobile forwards these days.
Yeah, agreed. And like you said, there is absolutely a place for the big boppers because they're the ones that win collisions through so many points of the game. But at the same time, you need to have those small mobile guys to take advantage of a good carry in behind the big guy or taking advantage of the opposition big guys when they get a bit fatigued. And Charlie, hopefully, long-term can be one of those points of difference in our forward pack. And we saw a bit of that last night with his smart line running in around the middle. And we didn't get to see it to its fullest, but we did see him act as a fulcrum as well, distributing the ball to the other backs and forwards in the team, which is, again, another part of being a lock forward in the NRL now. So it was very encouraging. And just in general, the attitude that he came out with was very refreshing. He was hungry, he was aggressive, but didn't get it. I know he got put on report shortly after the second half resumed, and I don't really know why. I was just checking the play-by-play on NRL.com to see if there was an incident cited, but it just said he was put on report. So I don't know what that's going to mean for him with the charge sheet, which I'm not sure what's come out yet. Let me just quickly check while we're talking. And it looks like it hasn't come out yet. Seeing a young guy come out and not be overawed and to be so aggressive but channel it so positive in such a positive manner is very, very good. It's difficult on your debut to step into that cauldron and make those sort of judgment calls. But he did it, and he did it really well on both sides of the football. Was it a flawless debut? Absolutely not. But was it a very, very good debut in really challenging conditions? 100%. So well done to Charlie. Well done to Jake Tungor as well. I thought he was great down that left flank, all things considering. The Eels gave away a few tries down that edge, but I don't think it was Jake's fault. He got heavily involved running the ball, had a great moment with a line break where put on the big goose step and then somehow got the offload away to Sean Russell to nearly generate a try. Well done to both rookies. I thought they played some really positive football in the wet conditions against a team that's honestly full of confidence. South Sydney were 4 straight wins coming into round 18 last night. Obviously, they made it 5 now on the trot. But, yeah, the rookies certainly weren't the reason why we didn't win that one in round 18.
Oh, no. And, there's some players I want to give a shout out to now, but even before we get to giving our 3-2-1s. Clint Gutherson last night, John, I don't think you could ask for more from him because...
Literally, the only knock on Guffo was after he did something fantastic in making that line break, you could feel him trying to convert it into points, right? When he went for the big cutout pass to the left, that was just the pressure of the game situation. Guffo was fantastic last night. Rock solid under testing high ball after testing high ball. South tried to send the wobblers his way, and he caught all of them. There was one try he saved when Latrell put the inside ball down our left edge, and he did the switch off the line breaker to the support runner beautifully.
I don't know how he did that.
That actually was what led to Reg making the try saver, I believe, wasn't it? It was the same sequence of events. So he saved the try and gave the opportunity for Reg to save a try. Absolutely ridiculous stuff from Guffo. And look, we spoke about his situation and what he's putting his body through for this team. It is so damn unfair, isn't it, the game sometimes, that you got someone like Guffo literally going to war for his team there physically, and it's just not playing out on the bigger scale of the team result. So well done to Guffo. I thought he was not just courageous, but excellent last night.
Oh, yeah. The 245 run meters, 5 tackle breaks, a line break assist, try saves. There have been Eels supporters calling for Gutho to retire. And who knows? It may well be that injury might dictate what happens with him, how long he plays on for, whether he has a change of position. But you know that the team is still so much better for him being part of it. And he's still producing performances like that at fullback. And maybe we know he's not a fullback in the mould of some of the dynamic fullbacks of these days, like the Hammer, who can score length of the field tries. But I tell you what, that break that you mentioned last night that he made, he really did slice through the middle and ran around Latrell Mitchell. He still has something to offer in attack, but it's just, we're talking about a bloke, and it's not ignoring the fact that Gutho's had his injuries that he's had to deal with, but I can assure our listeners, man, he is playing through considerable pain this year, has played through considerable pain, has done it over the years, has been an absolute warrior for the Eels. When his career is finished, he deserves to be spoken about in almost the same reverence as the mayor, Ken Thornett, because Ken Thornett never played in a premiership winning team for the Eels, but he's known as the mayor of Parramatta and listed as an all-time great for the Eels, and rightly so. But Clint Gutherson has brought every bit of that star player, that warrior, that bloke that gives everything for his team. He's honestly been a modern day marvel for the Eels. And for someone who came to the club as a Manly reject to deliver what he's done in his years at Parramatta, I want to see supporters be a bit more respectful about his contributions to the team, because my goodness, this bloke, he still deserves it. And whether his retirement comes at some point in the next year or two, or whether he ends up shifting to the centres so that a young talent like Blaze Talangi can move to fullback, that's, I just don't want to see people actually calling out for him to give the game away, because when you have performances like that last night in a team that performed poorly, and let's not forget that, in a team that performed poorly, that lost by 16 points, for him to turn in a performance like that, that says something about the bloke and what he delivers for the club. And I think probably what he delivers as well for his teammates. We saw that in his absence and in the absence of Mitch Moses, how we played was a lot uglier. So let's keep giving respect to Gutho for what he does produce.
Yeah, fair call, mate. Fair call. Running through the team sheet, I thought if you're talking about young guys that are having good games, Blaze Talangi down that right wing went for 130 metres, 6 tackle busts, both created and finished a sequence of play that led to him scoring a try to get the Eels within one score, I believe, at one point. Yes, it was one score, because it was the first hit back from the Eels while the South Sydney scored 2 tries.
And that tackle break he made, that line break, came from running fearlessly into the defence, and it's something that is part of his nature. If we think back to his debut, how he just charged at Turbo, and Turbo's a far bigger body than him, a superstar of the game, and he was like, "I'm going through you for this try," and Blaze doesn't take soft options. Now, we know that that he's still a work in progress, that he, sometimes that high ball, especially the one that's swirling around, can cause him some troubles. He's not a natural winger, but he's now played in a range of backline positions, basically every backline position. He played in the halves, centres, wing, fullback, and people are saying, what is Blaise Talangi's best position? I'll tell you what Blaise Talangi's best position is in first grade, in the Parramatta team in first grade. That is Blaise Talangi's best position. And we can work out the fine details later, but let's just keep it at that absolute minimum is in first grade at Parramatta.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
whoever ends up getting the appointment, whether they announce it today or next week as head coach, that's one of his first ports of call, isn't it? It's making sure that Blaise is in blue and gold next year. And obviously a big part of that back line, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And then my last two shout outs, 60s, and I'll let you go after that, is a couple of guys in the middle. I thought, again, in a team that wasn't necessarily great through the middle corridor, Joe Ofengawi had some great tempo and energy in his two stints, particularly his opening stint where he was fighting for every metre and falling forwards, which is what you want to see from your middles. And then a guy that started on the edge but then played most of his minutes through the middle, Ryan Madison. Just the sheer workload he got through last night was huge. He went for over 200 metres on the ground and then got through a good chunk of tackles as well at a reasonable economy, 31 tackles, just 3 missed, which was on the better side of the wet conditions the Parramatta Eels there. So 2 forwards that I thought put their hands up and fought hard amidst some of our struggles.
Yeah, and I think Joe has been on a good stretch of form this year.
He has.
He's stepped up as he's been needed. I think he's got potentially, even at a senior age, I think he's still got a lot to offer the club, and his best football for the Eels might even still be ahead of him. And Ryan Madison, I mean, there's been people who have been critical of Maddo for a range of reasons, but he actually played good wet weather football last night.
Yeah, he did.
And if you look at a particular column, under offloads, it says 0. Now, that tells you he was focused on the fact that he had a job to do out there that didn't involve offloads last night. It involved him carrying the football and making tackles, and that's despite the fact, as you said, that he started on an edge. But he was a player who was respecting the conditions last night, and I can't really fault his performance at all. So shout out to those players. Cardi made some errors last night, but also noted that those errors were in those first few minutes, and then he probably had a solid game.
And one was, I know you were frustrated by the challenge, but if I had to have one complaint about the officiating last night, it was probably that I thought Sean Kepi did knock on in that initial grab for the ball from the offload, but I can understand why you didn't want him to challenge, because it's just one of those ones where you're leaving it to a coin toss in the bunker.
Well, that should have been one of those calls where they said it was too difficult to
Eels retain the challenge but don't get the decision. Yeah, exactly.
They keep the challenge, and I thought, yes, it was. I didn't think it was clear what happened when the ball went into Sean Kepi, and that was evident from how long that decision took.
Yeah, and the fact that I think we challenged against the initial call, and then they said that we got that right, but then knocked on later, which I don't think would constitute an unsuccessful challenge, since the initial call was overruled. Just they found a secondary knock on. So that could have easily have been given as a challenge successful, but you still got it wrong. But yeah, aside from that, my gripes to the officiating last night were pretty much non-existent. Like, yeah, there was, you can argue South scored off a forward pass on Jack Whiten's first try and whatnot here and there, but as opposed to last week where it felt there was just a series of bad calls, last night it was mostly called pretty solidly. And if they're going to miss a call here or there, that's what we talk about, copying within an acceptable margin because of just the pace of the game. So, yeah, I wasn't too upset with officiating.
And that's something that we should acknowledge as well, because when we were critical of the officiating last week, we said that it was a contributing factor to the loss. We didn't say it was the sole reason for the loss, but it was a contributing factor. The officiating was fine last night. Yep. You know, you always get the odd, as you say, the odd call in a game where you're like, oh, you missed this or you missed that, but you wear that. Mm-hmm. It was when it came to the performance. The performance of the Eels was 100% a reason why the game was lost. South was solid, if not spectacular. They probably were playing a decent brand of wet weather football. It just seemed that, you know, look, we went through stints in that game last night where our defence was holding them in, had them pinned in their 20-metre zone for periods of time. But when South had the opportunities to score, they did such a better job of icing them than what we did.
And like you said, you could just see the speed of the transition. We were very sideways and, kind of shoveling the ball through large stretches last night, whereas South Sydney were crisp in the wet conditions, and that speed of their transition stuff and their ball distribution is what aided what looked to be pretty simple tries in. I think you were saying behind me, Latrell's going in here, and that was when he got out on the outside of Sean Russell and just used the wet conditions to slide from 4 or 5 metres out and score. South played the conditions very well in those attacking sequences. They moved the ball nicely. Had a couple of different changes of direction down our left edge that opened up the gap a couple of times, with Latrell using the inside ball after digging to the right. And we didn't respond well. And, it was just good football from Souths. Whiten, Walker, Latrell, all big contributors there. Their forwards, their forwards didn't dominate 60s, but we did such a terrible job of wrapping up the ball, and their ability to generate a late offload definitely led to a try or two. It led to the last try, it led to the try before half time, and it led to what the sequence that would be where Jack Whiten scored from coming in support from the other side of the field. Their forwards, while they didn't dominate, they certainly got the job done for those late offloads. And again, credit to South Sydney, they played good football in the conditions.
Yeah, it's we saw moments in that game, like for example, you spoke about it earlier, the lead up to the try by Regan Campbell-Gillard. We were punching in behind and to the side of the ruck. Behind the ruck, to the side of the ruck, and made inroads. Like the energy of Guymer's carries around the ruck. You could see that was the area where we should have been targeting in those conditions. And instead we just kept going sideways. And whilst there was a lot of ball movement, it was an attempt to play inverted commas, bright attacking football. The conditions weren't bright or suitable for attacking football like that. And there are times when in wet conditions teams produce football which belies the conditions. But last night called for just a lot of plays that should have been driving the opponents onto their back foot in those conditions. Just have them continually back peddling, trying to get quick play the balls, punching in through and behind the ruck. We just didn't see it. And maybe that keeps coming back to the forwards aren't up to it. We saw there's a couple of performances, or at least one performer out there who a lot of supporters have been targeting today and last night. There just wasn't the energy. It does come down to more than one player, a performance like that last night. But what we saw was times where you spoke about not wrapping the ball up, and you could see that, like you could see it from the stands. You knew the offload was coming because the players in the tackle just weren't doing a very good job at handling it. I mean, there was no big hit, first of all, in the defence. It was like stand and grab and then not locking the ball up, and then the players around just not being in the moment and seeing what was about to unfold. It was like they were standing back and watching. The players weren't coming across ready to make the defensive play, so that when, South, on the other hand, were finding moments of effort plays. We only had a couple of players who could find those moments last night. And, that was another part of that was another difference between the two teams. Mate, I'm in desperate need, mate, of being able to talk about a win. I don't know about you, but this is draining, breaking down losses and what we're not doing well. How is it that we are so down on some of the fundamentals of rugby league at the moment? And I hate to say it, but one of the most basic fundamentals that we're missing seems to be just those 1% plays.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think it's probably too harsh to say we're going through the motions, because I think there's too many players. There's still players out there who care. And I'm not suggesting there's players out there that don't care, but there are players out there that are finding a way of giving their absolute utmost to the team. And there are players there who just can't find it in them to produce anything more than, well, I guess we have to say losing football. So, we're about to hear about a new coach being appointed. If people think that a new coach on their own is going to make a difference to where we're at, it's not. It's not. I mean, everyone knows the roster needs an overhaul. I don't think we're going to get an overhaul unless we release players, because I don't think we can afford to go into the player market. I mean, we don't, like, who's available for next year anyway? Like,
yep. It's
it's
all well and good to tap 4 or 5 players on the shoulder and say, you're not required here anymore. Best of luck finding a place elsewhere. But the reality is that most of those guys are still core parts of the roster, and you have to replace them in some capacity. And the market is not in a good place for a club to go out and augment their roster after gutting it. So difficult times, whether it's Hannay, Riles, or someone else, whoever gets the call, got some hard work to do as soon as they hit the ground.
Well, I think, look, we've had a club like the Bulldogs who have been anchored to the bottom of the table, and they have aggressively purchased basically anyone they could get their hands on. And we've seen that their strategy is basically sign first, work out how you can fit them into the roster and the salary cap later. They've parted ways with players who are still under contract in a variety of ways, but they get it done. Now, obviously, Phil Gould enjoys good relationships with player agents. They're able to work through ways of finding new homes for different players, and I guess good luck to them. I mean, we get critical of a team that's operates in that way, but you know what? This year is showing, whether they make finals football or not, that they're making some of the right calls, and then they turn around and they're still adding to the roster for next year. I mean, we think, well, how are they going to afford Tupanua in their roster next year? And given the preponderance of back rowers and talented back rowers that they have at their club already, but that didn't stop them from getting a player that is a talented player who's available on the market right now, and whether they could fit him into the salary cap for next year or not, they've gone out and they've signed him. They'll make it work. I think as a club, we have to be a lot more aggressive in the way we compete in the player market.
It is very frustrating sitting here watching our, sort of slow and diligent approach seemingly backfire due to overpaying internal talent versus more cavalier approaches that have been, I wouldn't say bailed out, but the aggressiveness of teams like the Bulldogs going out signing players and just moving them on if they don't fit, leading to a better roster churn than what we've had here. I don't know. Right? The way.
Well, look, we've seen one of our own former players in Stefano be given permission from the Tigers to test the player market. Now, Stefano still lives in the heart of Parramatta. I see him locally. He's now whether he's at that because he's been reported as saying he's only really interested in changing clubs to go to a club that he believes has a prospect of delivering finals football or premiership success, and maybe the Eels don't qualify for that anymore. But we are his junior club. He is a young, aggressive prop forward produced by the Parramatta Eels. He would be one of the players that I would be targeting to reinvigorate the forwards. And I would pursue him aggressively with that. He comes to the club.
Yeah, well, you're right, because we talked about if you're tapping guys on the shoulder, whether it's Sean Lane or Reagan Campbell-Gillard, whoever the media is implicated in recent weeks and months. Stefano Utoikamanu is the only player that is there on the market that is a legitimate blue chip asset that you can go out and get to replace them. And I agree with you. If that's going to be the way we operate and we're going to be moving on those senior players, then Stefano makes it is the only solution out there that can actually improve the team significantly, both short and long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And he then is in a position where someone like him could be the new leader of a young pack, because we've got some emerging forwards and they're all of that mobile, aggressive type that's coming through. I mean, Charlie Guymer is the first example of one that's come through. People have seen Sam Tuiviti being selected in under-19s Origin. He made an impact when he came on there. But even within the Eels system, someone like Saxon Pryke he's getting New South Wales Cup time ahead of Sam. And, Saxon is, for mine, also the archetypal modern forward. It just high work rate, competitive, super competitive in how he plays, an absolute Trojan on the training track. Like he's almost like a forward version of Gutho. That's how hard he works out there. I mean, on top of that, he's just a great bloke that you could have as a role model within the club. He is only going to bring positivity to the club. So we've got players like that are coming through. So for mine, Stefano he's one of tomorrow's leaders for a forward pack.
Mm-hmm.
So please, Parramatta Eels, do whatever it takes. If there's any bridges that have been burnt, fix them. Pursue him. Let him know how valued he is. He's literally 5 minutes down the road from Parramatta Stadium. He's 20 minutes away from the Kellyville Centre of Excellence that will be there. The Eels are he's got his connections with players in the club. There are still, despite our poor performances, there are still selling points for the club with someone like Stefano. Just make things like this happen, please. Make it happen. And I mean, we know there's far more that needs to be done in the way of recruitment. Zach Lomax alone in the backs isn't going to get the job completed. So, let's pursue an absolute talent that we produced ourselves. Get him back to the club. Don't muck around. All effort and energy into doing that. So, because we know that we've got a dummy half of the future in Matt Arthur. We've seen what Charlie Guymer can produce. We've seen what Blaze Talangi can produce. We know that we've got some players that are coming through, but they have to be augmented with some real quality difference makers, game changers. And it's not going to happen by, as you're saying, the due diligence, make sure we tick every box in how we go about things. And, it's time to push some of the bounds in how we add to the roster. Don't be timid in any way in how we go about this. Bite the bullet. So, but, they're going to have to be ruthless. Now, hey, look, in the end, they were ruthless with BA. So they can't tell us that it's not within their capacity to be that way. So anyway, I don't know if there's anything more that we can say at this rate, mate. So maybe it's time for us to get into our 3-2-1s.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had a couple of those big performances from senior players and the young guys stepping up. Yeah, I'll let you go for the 3 points first because I'm keen to see which way you want to sort of set the tone for this one.
Look, I can't go past Gutho for the 3. To me, he's a standout in that regard. He was just, he played his heart out in that game and had the stats that backed it up, had moments which backed it up. So he's my 3.
Yeah, I think he's a deserver 3. So I will imitate you because I just think that in terms of the framing of the season, what he's going through for this team, on top of just the raw numbers and impact, and when your only blemish is making a great line break and then feeling the pressure to try and convert it immediately into points, it's kind of hard to knock him for that effort last night. And then we go to 2 points. And full disclosure, I'm going to go. I know Matto had a good game, over 200 metres, 30 tackles. He won't be making points this week just because I think, again, not an attack on Matto because he absolutely deserves 2 points in most weeks here. But just in the spirit of what this season now represents and going for the young guys, I will give Blaze my 2 points because I just feel like where this team now goes, it's on their shoulders. Both short and long term. And I think Blaze's effort last night, 0 drop balls in testing conditions, sparking a big play. You mentioned it, but the fearless nature and how he runs the ball. It's just always little things that capturing something that is missing in this team elsewhere.
Yeah, I can't disagree with your comments about Blaze, but I'm going to go in a different direction with my 2 and 1, whilst acknowledging that Blaze was definitely in the mix for me. I'm going to go with Charlie for my 2. And it's because he brought an energy to the team that few players possessed in the game last night. And for a player on debut, I just can't ignore. Like he simply caught the eye, and whether it was what was happening on the ball or off the ball, he just caught the eye with his effort and energy. So I'm going to go 2 with him. And mate, you signalled that you're not giving any points to Ryan Madison. Well, I am going to give a point to Ryan Madison.
He absolutely deserves points. Don't get me wrong. This is me being a little bit of a cheeky bugger this week, and no surprise that if I'm not giving Matto a point, and I've given Blaze a point, that my 1 point goes to the debutant in Charlie Guymer, who, like we've mentioned at length today, came on, hair on fire, loved the aggression, the focused, intent in how he was playing on both sides of the ball. Fantastic debut, and as you said earlier, 60s, he has solidified his place in the team instantly on the back of what we saw last week, and not even considering injuries to junior and selections elsewhere. Charlie is now part of his setup for the rest of the season 2024, 100% in my books. So well done to Charlie. Honourable mention, Jake Tunnell on debut. Love that. We talk about the difference between arrogance and confidence, and that goose step was just so beautiful in between. Goose step into the big left footer to nearly slice through and score a try on debut. Nearly scored in the corner elsewhere as well. I thought he had a great effort. And then after that, we mentioned him, Joe Fungahi. I thought he played real solid. Gets a bit skinny after that. Reg played all right, honestly. Some good runs, scored a try. That big tackle on Cody Walker. I thought the halves had their moments, both Dylan and Mitchell, but it was a case of they would create something or nearly create something and just couldn't convert it. And that happens sometimes, but it also means that you can't be in the points when it doesn't come off. So, yeah, there was efforts across the park, and the fact that the scoreline ended up 32-16, I wouldn't say it flattered the Eels because they, if you look at the stats and you look at the sequences of play, they were very heavily in this game for long stretches, just they couldn't convert. So, well done to the guys that we did give points to and the guys that just missed out, unfortunate. But the Eels move on after dropping another game, 32-16 to the Rabbitohs this week, mate. And then I suppose just a couple of words quickly on the Cup. We only saw a bit of this game because we were backing up from our pre-game show at Parramatta Leagues with the fantastic David Liddiard, and you'll be listening to audio about that shortly. But Eels 20-16 over the Rabbitohs. It felt like they did everything in their power to try and lose this one at the end, kicking out in the full, some bad fifth tackle options, the referee making some contentious calls to keep South Sydney in the flow. But they held on 20-16, hat-trick on both sides of the equation, actually. Samuel Luizu for the Eels alongside Lorenzo Mulatalo try, with Fletcher Myers for the South Sydney Rabbitohs bagging a hattie, and Leon Tahau also scoring for them. Goal kicking the difference, Ethan Sanders 2 from 4 versus South Sydney 0 from 4. So, our boys, like I said, provisionally now in the mix for the top 6, just the bye for the Panthers, keeping them separated. and it's certainly not the end of their climb, 60s, but it must be extremely validating for them to be concluding this round in and around the top 6 after where they started this year.
Well, they've gone from the start of the year of finding ways to lose to now finding ways to win.
100%. And it is the complete polar opposite.
Yeah, it's a mark of the evolution of the team, and as we've said at the start, they've had players. Well, I mean, if the NRL team's feeling the impact of not having the depth and losing players, then obviously the flow on is that it's going to mean that there's players missing from the New South Wales Cup. But they're in the forwards, they've had some of the younger players coming up to be part of the team. They're just, as I said, they're just finding that way to get things done. The latter part of the game, we saw some errors from the team in what we saw, because I think when I got over there, the Eels were at that stage leading, I think 20-4 was the score when I got over there. So I almost felt like I was the mock on the team.
It felt like it, didn't it? And based on what we saw,
the suggestion for me was that pass outs were available.
Get the hell out of the stadium, mate.
So supposed mates, telling me to make myself scarce. That was a bit rough.
From what I saw in the limited minutes we did get to see 60s, I liked what Jock Brazel was bringing to the table, some aggression and defense, forcing errors. Yeah. He ended up with the numbers already up, actually. 14 carries, 120 meters, on top of 22 tackles and a few missed there. So he's had a couple of good weeks now. And I'm not saying he's immediately in the frame for an NRL debut, but the way the season is going for the Eels at the top level, a few more games like that from Jock would probably have him closer to playing than not playing, or at least getting a cup of coffee.
Well, John, what Jock brings to the New South Wales Cup, what he has brought in these a couple of recent appearances, is that similar level of energy to what Charlie's brought. So when they've elevated Charlie, they've been able to bring in someone who has been able to compensate for that. So, very good from Jock in those two recent appearances. We'll try and look at some vision to give a few more details. I will say, I'll tell you what, the run of decisions went against him in that last 20-25 minutes that I saw. It was there was certainly the arm was pointing one way, but I guess that also came down to the run of errors and maybe discipline needing to be a bit better from the team in the closing minutes of that game. So it was. It's probably fair to say then I saw the worst of the game, but they managed to find a way to hang on, despite Dejan kicking off and kicking it out on the full with 3 minutes to go, when South scored a late try to make it a grandstand finish for them.
Yeah,
it was like, oh my goodness, well, how does this happen? How do you kick out on the full? And we're talking about over the sideline, not kicking it dead.
No, he just sprayed it to the left sideline. So
yeah. So that wasn't great. I mean, it's surely you drive it down the middle of the field.
Yep.
And keep it, maybe even keep it low and difficult under those conditions. But anyway, they found a way to hang on. I can't be throwing criticisms at Dejan when I haven't seen the entire game and look at the positive contributions that he may have made during the game. But it was just an example of, as I said, of there were errors in the latter part of the game, but they did manage to keep scrambling and found a way to win. So let's hope that continues, in spite of the fact that they're going to be probably losing another player or two with injuries to players in first grade. So, and maybe someone paying the penalty for a distinct lack of form in 2024. So, but as I said before, perhaps Junior's injury insulates someone from being dropped. But
It'll be interesting to see
anyway,
how that plays out. Yeah, we've got a couple of big forwards they can obviously call on immediately, alongside the likes of Makatoa, Greg, and Moretti, who have all got a bit of first grade to their name. And I believe Offa Ogden is due back soon, so that'll help in that regard too. But Trent's shown that he's willing to forever young guys in.
Yes, yeah. So, mate, that just about wraps things up for the instant reaction part of this podcast. I will try to get out to Kellyville. Hopefully, we're not having too much in the way of rain tomorrow, because the Jersey Flegg are playing up there. I'd like to be able to provide a live coverage of that game. Unfortunately, on that field, there really isn't the wet weather shelter in any way, shape, or form. It is a suburban ground. The field that they would be playing on at Kellyville. That will change, of course, when the Centre of Excellence is completed and there's a grandstand, a match field with a grandstand as part of the new complex. They've just got very limited seating, just a couple of those portable mini stands there, which I don't even think you call them a stand in any way, shape, or form. But there just basically isn't the shelter. So if it's teeming down with rain, it's going to be damn hard for me to blog off a phone or an iPad. So, but I will try to get out there and do the best that I can. And apart from that, we thank our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta helps us to do what we do, their support, and it's been there for many, many years. So thanks to Greg and the team there. Thank you as well to Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels, for hosting us and providing us with the Eels ambassadors that we have for our pre-match podcast every home game. And thank you to everyone that did turn up last night. It was really one of the most enjoyable podcasts that we did there. You'll hear in this podcast the great atmosphere in the club last night. The club was actually jam-packed before the game last night, which was great to see. And David Liddiard is an unbelievable guest. So it's always just a privilege to have any of our Eels ambassadors there. Please stick around, listen to what he shares with us, some of the funny stories, and also the details on the great work that he does within the community. I think it's well worth a listen. So apart from that, thank you again to our listeners. Thank you for all the kind words in your feedback to us. And John, as always, say, go you mighty Eels.
Yes, well said, mate. Without further ado, here's the pre-game show featuring special guest David Liddiard.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels. Are we going to see an Eels win tonight?
I hope so.
I reckon we can get it done tonight. Thank you for joining us here. We are the Cumberland Throw. My name's Craig. This is John. And as usual, we have a brilliant Eels guest. Our guest tonight is player 418. He played 69 games for the Eels out of a 135-game career. 40 tries in total with 19 at the Eels. He is a premiership winning player with the Parramatta Eels in 1983, which was actually his first year playing with the club, and we'll talk about that. Everyone, please welcome David Liddiard.
Thanks, mate. I bought my own fan club here, so I have to excuse these blokes.
Can we borrow them every week?
Yeah, they're available.
Firstly, David, you had that heart scare around Christmas time. How are you travelling these days?
Well, I've done better than Jeff Robinson. I was pretty devastated to hear his passing this week. He knocked me around just quietly when he played for the Bulldogs, but
I think he knocked a few players around too.
Yes, yeah. So that was pretty sad. But I did survive a heart attack. For a bloke that doesn't drink, never smoked, never done drugs, and I train every day. I got a real shock when I had 3 blocked arteries and had a massive heart attack. So, yeah, it was a bit scary.
I couldn't believe when I heard the news, because you are legitimately one of the fittest individuals I know for your age. When we first had a chat a couple of years ago up at Jack's Bar and Grill, you were flexing the six-pack, and much to Steve Eller's delight, he had a lot of fun with that. And yeah, when the news broke, I couldn't believe it, and it's an important reminder, I suppose, to everyone that, you know, we're all vulnerable to something like that.
I think being Aboriginal, we don't have a real long life expectancy, but I'd like to try and be like my hero, the Honourable John Brown, that's sitting here, is 92 today. He's come along, he's been a big Eels fan, and if I can live to 92, I'll be real happy. Yeah, he played for West.
That everyone's got.
Yeah, we won't hold that against
Everyone's got to have a negative to their
Honourable.
character, exactly. So let's talk a little bit of football, mate, because tonight we've got a couple of players making their debut. Jake Tago and Charlie Guymer, who's a Parramatta Eels junior. Your debut was back in round 2 of 1983. Sixties already mentioned you won a premiership that year.
Yep.
What do you remember explicitly about that game being the first in a pretty storied NRL career or rugby league career?
Well, I was really fortunate to get a phone call from Jack Gibson and Dennis Fitzgerald, and we didn't have mobile phones back then, and I was living at home with my mum and dad, and Jack called me and said, boy, Liddiard, bring your boots, be at Cumberland Oval at 5 o'clock, and I went, F off, who's this? I thought someone was playing a practical joke on me, and Dennis grabbed the phone and said, David, bring your boots and be at Cumberland Oval, like Jack said. So I turned up at 5 o'clock, walked into the dressing room, and Ray Price and Ray Higgs and Ron Hilditch and Sterling, Kenny, Crone and all those boys were there, and I signed a contract for not much money, and I was 19 years old. So I got a run in the 83 under-23s grand final. In 1981, it was the under-23s grand final. I played in that, and then I played in the reserve grade grand final in 82, and then debuted in 1983 in first grade.
And we just mentioned then about the debuts tonight, Jake Tago and Charlie Guymer. Can we get a round of applause for our debutants tonight? We've even got some of Charlie's family here in the room tonight, so let them hear your applause for him. A great moment for anyone making their debut, but David, 1983 was quite an incredible year for you. You won Rookie of the Year award. You were part of the 1983 Premiership winning team. Do you ever reflect back on that season and think about how amazing it was to have that as your first season?
Well, we had some amazing players at Parramatta at the time, and Jack was a phenomenal coach, and, you know, the honour to play under Jack and win Dally M, because I was up against a lot of players in that time, and, you know, the players that I played with, Crone and Kenny, Ella, Growth, they made me look good, really. I think it was, I just did my best to try and run off them, and they set me up. So I was very fortunate to play in a side that, you know, had played in 5 grand finals and won 4 of them. So, yeah, pretty cool.
Our first interview with you going back a couple of years, we actually posed a question about any player we could think of in the history of the Eels, let alone other clubs, that had made it to first grade without playing in the junior pathways, which, for those who are wondering, would be the Harold Matthews or the SG Ball. And it was a perfect coincidence that you happened to come up and let us know that you were that exact individual who hadn't played pathways football. For young players in the metropolitan areas, that's very unusual these days. Pretty much every player is graded as a ball or mats player. Was it unusual back then as well?
Well, I didn't know at the time, but I had an amazing guy who I got to know really well, who sadly passed away, Billy Rayner, who played for the club, and he was the scout. And they'd heard about me. I was playing pretty decent club footy at a team called the Colleton Colts out near St Mary's, and yeah, that's when I got the call from Jack and Dennis, and you know, turning up and being involved with a club like the Eels, even though 1981 it was their first grand final, they won actually. So and then to be around the players that were playing reserve grade and under 23s, they were pretty handy as well. And then to get a call up and win Dally M Rookie of the Year against some pretty decent players. So I worked hard though, I did a lot of work to try and be the best I could be. So, it wasn't just stroll in and take a position.
David, one of the things that we spoke about just before we started this was about player numbers that you receive as being a first grade rugby league player these days. And we mentioned before that you're player 418, but back in those days, there wasn't those sort of jersey presentations with a player number that you have in the club. So it's more of a recent phenomena. How important is it to have a player number? And is it actually something that you remember off the top of your head, what your player number is?
Well, you asked me that question before we started this, and I thought it was 417, so I was trying to cheat, but it was 418. But look, I'll take that. The 418th player to play and win a grand final with the Eels. I really love this club. They've done a lot for me. Devastated when Jack Gibson passed away. Devastated when Ron Massey passed away. Jack was probably the best coach I had, and I had Tim Sheens as a coach. I had a call called Graham Lowe at Manly, who I copped a hide when I went to Manly. But I had some great coaches, but no one could ever fill the shoes of Jack Gibson.
You know what, I'm now going to double check your player number because you've got me now thinking, I hope I didn't make a typo, and now I'm telling you that you're 418 when you are really 417.
Not sure.
In the meantime, while 60s is checking, I want to talk to you about our preparation for this podcast, because when we were doing our socials, we had you billed as a premiership winning winger, and that's technically true because in the grand final, that's where you played. But if you go through your records, you actually played more time at fullback than wing, including that Rookie of the Year campaign. Would you consider yourself more of a winger or a fullback given your career?
I wish I was built like Eric Groth. I've been watching the highlight reels of Guru, and I remember him beating about 8 players to score against the Bulldogs, and Steve Morter was on his back most of the way. But I didn't have the strength and the ability of Eric Groth, because I think out of the back line, every player played for Australia except for me. I played like 5 city country games, but every time I played city country, I got hurt. Now, I don't know if I was good enough to play for Australia, but we had a sizzling back line, and I used to run off Mick Cronin because the Crow could hold blokes up and always get a ball away, so he made me look good. So,
He was like Artie Beetson of the back line.
100%.
We're reliably informed from Steve Ella that he set up that try for Eric Groth that particular day.
Yeah.
Steve wouldn't stretch the truth with us.
No, not at all. No, Zip. he scored some amazing tries himself. Like for a bloke that weighs the same as me, not built like Guru, he had pace, and he's got a good bloodline. Like I'm good friends with his cousins, Mark, Len, and Gary, who played that other game. I can't remember what it was now, but they're all freaks as well. But Zip, as you've had a couple of podcasts with Zip, and he's just a humble bloke. We have a reunion every year with the 80s guys, and me and Zip normally go for a walk of a morning, get a coffee, and just talk about old times, So yeah, he's an absolute champion bloke.
One of the things that does strike us about that particular era in Parramatta and the players that played for the club is how tight you were as a group and remain so.
Yeah, it's like I said, I was 19, I'm 63 now, so 40 years has gone like the blink of an eye, but we all stayed together. I rang Mick Cronin up a few months ago. I think I heard he was selling his pub in Gerringong, and I rang him and I just said, I need to tell you something. I've had a crush on you since I've known you. And he goes, how about you keep that to yourself? And I've gone. But the Crow was just the world's nicest guy, still is. And they all are. Like, they don't walk around with big heads. Jack was really consistent on making sure that we were down to earth and took everything in our stride and not strutted around like peacocks, basically. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Steve doesn't mind me saying this, but I had a chat with Steve walking over to the stadium after his last appearance with us, and he said to me it surprises him that people still want to meet him and have a photo, because he said, you know, I'm nobody now. And my thought in my head straight away is, no, you're Steve Ella. Like, seriously. But that is honestly how humble and how he feels about himself.
And I think a lot of the boys are the same. Like, I walked out of my apartment a few weeks ago and this bloke walked past me and stopped and looked me up and down, and I checked my fly. I thought my fly was undone. And I've gone, you all right, mate? And he goes, mate, you're David Liddiard. And I went, yeah. And he goes, oh, I'm a massive Parra fan. Can I get a photo? I said, sure. And he told me more about my career than I knew. So we've still got some really great supporters out there, thank God, that still love the club.
Well, we spoke about your try-scoring exploits before, so I'm going to test you on what you know about yourself. Rather than asking you to recall each and every one of your tries, have you got a favourite one?
I think the one that sticks out to me was the wall that Jack showed us. You know, no one ever spoke back to Jack, like, ever. And he did Jack was a big fan when they burnt Cumberland Oval down and we moved to Glades Granville Park. Yep. Jack set up a bus, and he was a big NFL watching the American football. And he was a Green Bay Packers, and the coach of the Green Bay Packers was a bloke called Vince Lombardi. And every Tuesday night we'd sit on and watch a bit of NFL, and I got into it in a big way. I ended up going over to Miami and watching the Super Bowl and got looked after big time. And but Jack said we're going to do this move called the wall, and I was playing fullback, and I'd come through and Sterlo and all the players had run in different directions, and I got the ball off Sterlo, opened up and scored the try. And but I had a quick look back and I just thought, wow, that was easy. And I walked in at half-time and Jack goes, boy, Liddiard, come here. And I've gone, oh. I said, he said, don't ever look back. You would have given it away as a forward pass or something like that, you know. So
maybe an obstruction.
Something like that. But I ended up scoring the try, and people didn't sort of question Jack. Jack would go to Sterlo, I want you to kick to the Seagulls. Now, what do you think that means? Like,
where the Seagulls go where players aren't.
So you got it straight away, but no, we were looking at each other going, what are we going to do here? No one wanted to go back and go, I don't know what you're saying, Jack. But he was a phenomenal coach, the best ever.
I actually borrowed that Seagulls line when, as a school teacher, I was coaching the league tag team, and kids being kids, they always want to gravitate wherever the ball is going, and my instruction to them was that they had a call for each other, which was Seagulls, which meant have a look at where the opposition wasn't, and that was just for passing the ball and what direction to run in. So it wasn't even like kick, it was like, it just meant to them, go where the other team isn't going. So, I learnt that lesson off Jack.
Jack was the best ever. Like I said, I've had some great coaches in Tim Sheens, who was out of Penrith when I was there, and I've had Graham Lowe, and I've had some good coaches in England when I played at Oldham and Hull FC and Hull KR. But I'm not going to say they don't come close to Jack, but they don't come close to Jack.
Now, earlier on, you said that you weren't as strong as the Guru, and that is true. And to be fair, most NRL players these days still aren't as strong as the Guru. But you were an exceptional athlete, and one of your greatest strengths was your pace. Now, how would you rate yourself in your prime against some of the modern speedsters like Jason Saab or the Hammer Tabai, who plays for the Dolphins?
I was very fortunate because I used to go and train on my own at an oval, and I used to watch this young bloke being coached to do 100-metre sprints. So I went up to the bloke and I said, oh, I'm impressed with your young bloke. And he goes, my son, he's going to go to the Olympics. He said, I'm his sprint coach. And I said, he remembered who I was, and I said, can you show me some technique? So I started doing sprint training. My father used to train athletes. My first cousin was a guy called Ray Blacklock who played on the wing with Chicka Ferguson in Newtown in 81. And he passed away a few years ago, sadly, of motor neurone disease. But I used to train out in the backyard as a young bloke, and I had all these Muscle Fit magazines, and I loved it. So I do stupid things like run from Parramatta to Penrith for training. I'd run up the Blue Mountains. I'd swim the Nepean River. Just really crazy stuff. But it helped me in my footy career.
It's
not now, but
fair to say that you might have been ahead of your times then. If you were doing biomechanic focused training on your sprinting, you were almost the prototype for the modern athlete when it came to rugby league.
Well, it wasn't cheating, but this bloke knew how to make. His son
smart training.
Didn't win the gold medal at the Olympics because he was up against African American black guys that were built like brick shithouses, but and they were probably on the gear, but you know, I had to run fast to get away from big blokes like Noel Cleal and those bloody crazy guys that hurt you really badly.
Well, David, just turning now to more recent times, NAIDOC week commences on Sunday. You're a proud Narabal man from northern New South Wales, and you've been heavily involved in helping to advance the health, education, employment and sports opportunities for Indigenous youth. Our listeners may not be aware of this, but in 2014 you received the Order of Australia Medal for your services to Indigenous youth. Yeah, round of applause definitely there. I told you we want to keep these fellas too. On top of that, you've received numerous accolades for your work within the Indigenous community in those areas of education, health, sport and business. Why did you take it upon yourself to make such a difference?
Well, Aboriginal fellas don't have a real long life expectancy. You know, in a place like Wilcannia, their life expectancy is 36, which isn't great. So, and the bloke coming up to the microphone, Phil Maligan's a police officer from Moree, and I've got to know him. He's a bit of a big fan of the Eels, and I was out in Moree. I get an opportunity to go out to these communities and work with young Aboriginal youth, and as you see on the TV and the news these days, our young ones are out of control a little bit, and Phil is I don't know what your title is with your police.
Inspector out there, Dave.
He's in Moree, and Phil does. I'm going to let him tell you what he does because it's phenomenal. I've been out and witnessed firsthand, and I love his work, and he also loves the Eels, as you can see, and he's brought all his mates and his brother down to watch the team tonight, so hopefully the Eels can get up for him. But yeah, can you explain what you do?
Thanks, Dave. And Dave and I are great friends, and we've got a lot in common in respect to the Eels. And not only that, we both played for the Mallee Men at one stage in our career. But Dave has been up to Moree, and as Dave said, we've got some issues up there with some of the youth. And Dave, being a proud Aboriginal man, he comes up there and he assists us. And we've got the Guymer project up there, which Dave really enjoyed, and that's all about engaging with the youth. We've got an outdoor cinema screen. We've got footballs that we hand out to kids because rugby league is dead set religion up there amongst the youth up at Moree. And earlier this year, the chairman of the NRL, Peter Volandis, kicked off Project Pathfinders, and Dave was up there for Project Pathfinders, and that's all about linking up the Aboriginal youth with one of the rugby league players in the NRL as a mentor. And we've seen great wins there with that, with the youth in the community. And, you know, Dave and I have grown a good friendship together and respect, and we run things past each other all the time in relation to how we can better mentor the Aboriginal youth, because Dave's a proud Aboriginal man, and it's great to have you on board, Dave. And to think 40 years ago you were a legend, and 40 years later you're still a legend with what we're doing with the Aboriginal community up there in Moree. So thank you for your continued support. You are doing great things still 40 years later in your career with your proud heritage as an Aboriginal man and the Aboriginal people up in Moree. So it's important that people know that he's not just a rugby league player. He's a mentor. He's a leader, and I'm proud to call you a friend. So it's great that you're on this podcast here tonight, Dave, and hearing some of those stories.
Thanks, Phil. It's very embarrassing.
So, David, staying with the current day, the NRL seems to be noticeably faster these days. You've got teams that are spreading the ball and chancing their hand even in their own half. It's looking like they're taking advantage of compressed defences. As an outside back, if you're playing in this current day, how do you and you're involved in a compressed defence, how do you defend against those sorts of shifts with obviously some really speedy wingers that are involved in the game these days?
Well, I think one of the wingers that's played for South is the highest scoring winger, Alex Johnson, I think it is. And, you know, what's the second origin where they finally give Mitch Moses a shot at halfback, and to see what he did, his kicking game, just, you know, I'm not going to compare him to Peter Sterling because it's obviously a different era, but Mitch Moses is a freak, and I just thought he had a great game, and I'm a proud New South Wales man, and I'm looking forward to New South Wales flogging Queensland in the next origin. So,
yeah, so obviously you need pace to combat pace, but that's...
All right, and it's always fun to get the lens of a play from a different era on the current game. Craig obviously asked you about the defence there, but I want to talk about which players impress you in the current NRL, probably more outside backs, I suppose, but is there a favourite player you've got in terms of how they play, what they bring to the game and the product?
I like Gutho, and I like Mitch Moses. I can't obviously pick every Parramatta Eels player in there, but I just love the club so much and I want them to do well. I just feel gutted that I'm hopeful we don't get the wooden spoon, but you know, I'm hopeful this board will make a decision and we'll grab a champion. There you go. We'll have a coach next week. I don't know who it's going to be, but you know,
We've got our money on Josh Hannay probably being named. That's who we're putting our money on. We haven't had any inside word, but that's what we think it'll probably be.
I think he'd be a great coach. So
looking at tonight, and we've talked about those debutants in the Eels side. We've also had Matt Arthur debuting last week. We had Blaze Talangi debut earlier in the year. Charlie, Matt and Blaze, they're all Eels Pathways players. Are you an advocate of blooding young players if the team's in a position where finals is too much of a stretch in a season?
I think you've got to. I think they're at the bottom of the ladder, and I think time's right now to start putting some blokes in there that deserve a run. Like these guys have been playing really well. They're good footballers, and I think it's blooding them now makes sense.
And it's pretty obvious that the Eels haven't had a great season. Obviously, you mentioned that we're trying to fight our way away from the wooden spoon, but they take on the South Sydney Rabbitohs this week, who are on a bit of a surge, won 4 games, had 2 byes, so accumulated 12 points in the last 6 weeks. If and how can they beat the South Sydney Rabbitohs tonight, by your estimation, mate?
Well, coming back from blokes like Jack Gibson said it's all about defence. If you can stop blokes from scoring tries, then hopefully it makes it a little bit easier, because I think we have got some players like our great fullback, what's his great fullback? I forgot his name, our fullback.
Oh, Gutho?
Gutho, yeah, Clint Gutherson. And he's a great footballer. And Moses and these young blokes coming through, I think we're a good chance tonight.
Well, that brings us pretty much to the end of the podcast. But, mate, just before you go, first of all, can New South Wales, you talked about being a proud New South Welshman, can we take the Origin Series 2-1?
Billy Slade, I've been watching his interviews, I'd love to see. He's a great footballer, obviously, and done really well. But I'm confident if they play like they did in Game 2, we're a big chance of getting them.
Okay, and finally, which Eels players having a big game tonight, and what's the score going to be? It's a big tip time.
Well, I can't go past Moses. He's been in great form, and if he carries that through tonight, his kicking game, I think he'll. I think we'll come out on top. I think it's a bit cold outside, so they'll be doing a bit of running around so to warm up. But I hope we get them about 26-16.
Sounds like a reasonable score. I'll take that. I'll take a 1 point win if we can get it, to be honest.
Me too.
Well, David, we really appreciate you joining us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a big round of applause for David Liddiard?
Thanks, boys. Cheers.